number's clearly on the rise. I mean, that's a number that's impacting everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that we still don't realize, I think the average person doesn't realize that the way it's impacting things. I've seen it in what we do. I've seen it go from 3 years ago, I could say it influenced no cases. Then it was 6 cases, and it was few. And then last year it was 28, I think, out of what we did. That you just see it creeping in, and it's becoming more and more mainstream. I don't want to say acceptable, but it's not as shocking because you almost expect it that it's going to happen. What's the best part of your job?
Right now I'm in management, so I enjoy a lot of aspects that come along with that. So I'm not on the road as much, which makes being on the road a little more enjoyable in the rare cases that I do it once in a while. But for me, I like helping families for sure, especially the ones that their loved one had died several years ago, or they're not quite sure what the situation was maybe 10, 20, or 100 years ago, and we can go into archives and kind of help them bring some closure to that family.
Do you get a lot of requests for genealogy type things?
More and more lately.
Huh.
Yeah.
And how far back do your records go?
1895.
1895, wow. Do you, when you're dealing with those, there's something about records that are handwritten, you know.
Yeah.
They used to use leather-bound books and everything.
Yeah.
There's something about that, because I don't think that looking at a screen is going to take people back the way opening that tactile book up with its feel and its smell. When you do that, do you have a sense of, you know, the person that wrote that, you know, being in their shoes, you know, centuries later?
Yeah,
you feel a
really
connection
interesting.
or something?
The script that they use with the pen, and everything was handwritten, and all of the strokes are very similar on all the cases. You know, they have to write the age, the gender, whether or not they were married, and just everything is identical in this script. And then they write a little blurb about what happened to this person. You know, not as much as we write now for our records, but still, it's a little something to kind of give you an idea of what happened to this person that long ago.
Have you ever gone back and read those when you didn't have to? Have you ever just read them to read them?
No, I haven't. No.
It'd probably be interesting to get all that digital at some point, you know, and come up with some old-timey stats on stuff, you know.
Yeah, that's something we were trying to do with our Facebook page. Something we called Vintage Forensics, where we're going to try to track down 70 or 80-year-old cases that were kind of interesting, and see how we could, how it would be different from then versus today, if we would do anything different, or if the outcome would be a little different. But that kind of didn't garner as much interest as I thought it would on Facebook. But
that'd be really neat. That'd be really neat.
So.
Yeah. What if you could get some kids from programs like you were in, and give them each a case and have them present it using today's.
Sure.
You know, that would be interesting. Yeah. That does sound interesting. So you guys are 24/7, of course.
Yeah. We're one of the few essential offices in the county.
It wasn't this county. It was another county. So I'm not going to name the county, but we had a case, and we found the body, had to wait for the coroner because there was some question as to how the person died. And I learned an important lesson about waiting for the coroner on Super Bowl Sunday. I was out there a lot longer than I thought I was going to be out there. In what we do, we've seen the biggest thing to slow down long-term response on stuff is Super Bowl Sunday and March Madness. You know, I dread it when I have to go, because we find we're going to be out here all day waiting, because you can't. I don't think people realize it, that when you find somebody, there's a chain of custody maintain. You don't just find them and leave them out there. Mm-hmm. And lots of times we're so far out, we've got to wait for somebody to get there, and then when they get there, we've got to get somebody to go and get them and bring them in, because you know, like that case that I met you on, we had time before you got there, and we cut you a nice path back to the body and everything.
Yeah,
you know, yeah, you got the A grade treatment because we were waiting for you, and it wasn't like we were waiting a long time. You got there pretty quick. But I said, we got time. Cut him a pass so he doesn't have to wrestle to get out there, and because lots of times you're a one-man operation, right? And I guess you count on help on the scene because you're not going to be the only one there. Are you ever the only one there?
No, thankfully not. There's always going to be law enforcement if it happens outside of a facility.
Do you ever have you ever found a situation where you're the last one there? Because it would just seem to get a little creepy.
Yeah, I can count on one hand the number of times I've been left at a scene, and the most memorable one was in one of our townships, and I was investigating the death, and it was the one officer there, and all of a sudden on his radio he hears something about shots fired.
He just leaves you.
And it was, a couple of blocks away, and he was like, "Hey, you cool, man?" And I said, "Yeah, we're good. You can go." So we got out of there shortly thereafter, though. But all other times they stay, and it's a joint operation between us and law enforcement for sure. So we're there to help each other out.
Do you have a favorite story? Do you have like a story that you're known for telling?
People usually ask what's the weirdest or the strangest things I've seen or the most gruesome, but not one really stands out to me. If you wanted a specific example of a situation, I could probably pull one out.
That's kind of the same answer I give when people ask me, because it's in the course of a conversation, something will bubble to the top given the context of the conversation, but I don't have one that stands out at a given moment. Because everything is, I guess it was a year ago or something, we were sitting around talking. It was me and some of my officers, and he said, "Okay, what's the most normal case we've had?" And I said, "That I can bite into, that I can bite into." And we came up with one case in 40 years that was absolutely just straight up normal. There was nothing odd about it. No one lied to anybody. It was what it was, and because, just by the fact that, you're involved, you're in that chain of people that very often meets people on what could be the worst day of their life so far, and I don't think people realize how big that grouping of people is. That does that, and you only meet people for the most part. That's why the Facebook thing that you guys are doing is a great idea, reaching out to different people, because it's kind of shining a little light on there and making it not as mysterious. And
right,
is that your baby?
We're trying to maybe get rid of or clear up some of the cliches about what we do too, but we're trying to spotlight some of our interns and some of our employees and equipment that we use and stuff like that. But it's like I said, I'm wearing all black and you've got on blue stripes and tan pants and stereotypes, and I think that's a great use of Facebook. I don't pay a lot of attention to a lot of different stuff, but I found the stuff that you posted on there to be interesting, and it was interesting to see the interns, and I think you've had past interns on there and everything talk about it, and it it's kind of like I try and do on the show is humanize different occupations, and people don't think about that. I remember that day when I was watching, I was like, that guy likes his job. Just happy because you got out of the van and you kind of popped down and you went around back and you got the gurney and you looked up in the sky a little bit and smiled and you went back there. It's like, he's just happy to be here. And it gives you perspective. Do you feel as though doing this job has given you a different perspective on life that many people aren't lucky enough to have? Oh, without a doubt. We see, tragic freak accidents sometimes where if someone had been going a mile an hour slower on the highway, they would have missed this terrible crash that they were in, or something happens like a tree falls on someone in the woods. Just I really think about that sometimes, about how every day is precious for sure.
We had I guess you may have been in a case where the guy went missing and he committed suicide against the tree and then wasn't found for years because lightning hit the tree and it fell on him.
At the farm park?
Yeah.
Over there?
Yeah.
It wasn't me out there, but that's a memorable case.
But yeah, that was your tree falling thing, and I I think about that. I think about that to this day. That either way, I guess it was happening that night. Or whatever, and it's amazing how, like you say, 1 mile per hour, these coincidences. That when it's time, it's time. And you say 1,000 cases a year. Do you see, other than drugs, do you, and this actually may be a bigger question, maybe we can about a little bit. I recently had a case, and I believe you have clear things. You have homicide, and then you have accidental death. And there was a debate because his case was listed as suicide, and the family didn't want it to be suicide. And I understand both. I understand the factual scientific part. I understand, with the family saying, and I had a discussion with them, and because the person had, there were some mental health issues, and there were accidented by. We're starting to see, and this is not scientific at all, but we're starting to see cases where people in their mid to late 30s get impacted, who have a completely under control mental thing. They contract Lyme disease, and just late 30s, the wheels fall off of everything, just suddenly. And I don't know if they're going to find out in a couple of years that there's some kind of connection between Lyme disease, which is known to degenerate things, and just augmenting things. But we had this debate about what is, if somebody's doing something and they harm themselves, but they're not in their right mind, is that, and I kind of called it involuntary suicide, because is there something in between? Is there a gray area? We have 47 genders now. Isn't there room for another area in there, perhaps, where somebody doesn't? Because I debated both sides of it with the family, because I understand where the medical examiner's coming from, and I understand where the family's coming from, and one's coming from fact and one's coming from emotion. But I also thought about it and said, if you had that same person and they drove into the river, and that same exact car, same location, and the person was 90 years old, they'd say, the old guy got disoriented and lost track. They wouldn't say suicide, and it's the exact same circumstances. So we would give him a break or something, because we would throw other parameters on her. I wonder if we could throw those parameters on somebody when they're younger. Any thoughts on that?
Sounds like very complicated case.
Yeah.
What I can say is they both sound like, your two scenarios sound like they require a lot of background investigation for sure, into their medical history. But to answer your question about if there's a gray area, something we use rarely is a manner of death called undetermined. If we're not sure if it was an accident versus a suicide, we can use that as a manner of death.
But you, like you said, you very rarely, because that's something that's going to be pried open at some point. Somebody might go back to that because,
Yeah, that's the point, that we can go back to it. Yeah, if more information comes out in the future.
Do you have many cases that you go back to?
No, not many.
That's good. That's a good thing then.